They say silence is peaceful. But for Trao, silence had turned into a quiet kind of dying. Not the loud, tragic kind. No. This was slower, hidden. Like a candle burning in a room no one entered anymore. Each morning, he woke up without intention. The alarm would go off, and he wouldn't feel anything. Not tired, not rested. Just nothing. He moved through his days like a shadow of a man who used to dream. He had a job, a room, a routine, but no fire, no music, no pulse. He didn't know when it happened. But at some point, he had stopped being alive and had simply started existing. Trao's life was boxed in by 4 grey walls, a one-room apartment that held more dust than memories. The only sound he ever heard was the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking of a clock that didn't care whether he lived or vanished. No visitors, no calls, no mirrors that told the truth. And yet, on a rainy Wednesday evening, everything changed. When he got home from work, the door to his apartment was slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, nothing broken, nothing strange, except for a piece of black paper resting exactly in the center of the floor, as if placed with purpose. In silver ink, it read, "If you do not burn, you will rot." The order of the rift. He stood there for a full minute, unmoving, not because he was scared, but because something about the message hit too close, too personal, like it knew him, like someone had seen the cracks in his armor. He laughed, tossed it aside, told himself it was a joke, probably some neighborhood prank. But later that night, he couldn't sleep. His body was tired, but his mind was wide awake. He felt restless, like something had been stirred inside him that couldn't go back to sleep. When he did finally drift off, the dream came. In the dream, he was walking through a hallway that never ended. On either side were doors, each one labeled with a secret he never told. The day you gave up. The time you lied to protect someone who didn't deserve it. The part of you that still wants to scream. He tried to run, tried to wake up, but he couldn't. At the end of the hallway was a door with no label. He opened it. Inside, he saw himself, but not the version he was now. Younger, clear-eyed, standing tall with a defiance that had long since left him. That version looked at him and said just one thing. "Do you even remember who we were?" Trao sat up in bed, heart racing, breath shallow. The dream was gone, but it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a message, and in his hand, clenched, tight without even realizing it, was the same piece of black paper. Most people would call it coincidence. Some would say paranoia. But there's something about knowing when something is meant for you. You don't need proof. You just feel it. The next morning, he didn't go to work. He didn't eat, didn't turn on the TV. He just sat there, staring at the paper. He couldn't explain why it mattered. He just knew it did. He opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was an old photograph. Him at 19, holding a guitar, surrounded by friends he no longer spoke to. He looked real. There was something in his eyes that burned, a kind of wildness, a refusal to bend. That part of him was gone. Or maybe not. Maybe just buried. Later that day, he went to the corner store. As he walked past an alley, a black crow landed on a fence beside him. It didn't caw, didn't flap its wings, just stared, unblinking, as if waiting. He took a step forward. The crow flew. He followed, down narrow paths he didn't know, past buildings he'd never noticed, until finally it landed atop an old rusted door hidden behind an abandoned bookstore. On the door, scratched into the metal, were the words, "Entry forgotten." He reached out, hand trembling. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Recognition, and then, before he could touch the handle, a voice behind him said, "If you enter, you cannot return." He turned around. No one. He turned back. The door was gone. Only the crow remained, perched on a different wall now. It tilted its head, watching him. Then it whispered. Yes, whispered. You are not late. Yet. And with that, it flew away. That night, he didn't sleep again. But this time, he didn't want to. Somewhere deep inside him, a fire had started. Small, fragile, but real. You might think this story is fiction, but let me tell you something real. There's a man named Ray. He worked in a windowless basement office for 11 years, inputting numbers for a company that didn't even know his name. One night, his little brother sent him a voice note that said, "You don't laugh the same anymore." It shattered him. Within 48 hours, Ray quit, traded the office for a motorcycle repair shop. He didn't know anything about bikes, but he learned. Now, he smells like grease and freedom. He says he lost half his salary and found all of himself. That's not fiction. That's the truth most people are too afraid to chase. Sometimes, the invitation to change your life won't come as a promotion. Sometimes it comes as a black crow, a silver message, or a dream that doesn't leave when you wake up. For Trao, it had started, and somewhere deep inside you, maybe it already has. Because when life whispers, only the forgotten choose to stay asleep. Trao didn't return to work the next day. He didn't tell anyone. Not because he was avoiding them, but because he realized there was no one left to tell. He spent the morning walking through parts of the city he had forgotten, not the clean, polished streets filled with cafes and commuters, but the broken corners, the old alleys with peeling posters and the smell of metal and rain. Every block felt like it had a memory hiding in the cracks. Somewhere between two shutdown factories, he saw her, a girl sitting on a milk crate, drawing with charcoal on the wall. Her coat was torn, her hair tangled, but her hands moved like they belonged to a master. She didn't look up when he passed, but when he stopped and turned back, she spoke without lifting her eyes. "You saw the crow, didn't you?" Trao froze. She looked up. "It doesn't come to everyone." He asked her what it meant. She shrugged, smearing a line of charcoal across her cheek like war paint. "Some say it means you're breaking through. Others say it's a warning, but it always means change." Then she added, "Most people ignore it." He stared at her drawing. It was a burning tree, not on fire, but alive with fire. Each branch has a flame, each root glowing from within. "It's not supposed to make sense," she said. "It's supposed to wake you up." Before he could ask more, she handed him a piece of folded paper, already yellowed, like it had waited years for this moment. "Go to the abandoned tunnel under Ashridge Bridge," she said. "Sunset. Don't be late." He opened the paper. Inside, only 5 words. "Remember what you used to be." He walked home slowly, not because he was tired, but because he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt watched, not in a paranoid way, more like someone was hoping for him, like a forgotten part of the world was holding its breath, waiting to see if he would follow through. At 6:37 p.m., Trao stood beneath Ashridge Bridge. The sky burned orange behind the metal beams, casting shadows that looked like scars across the road. Beneath the bridge was a tunnel, fenced off, locked, with signs that screamed, "Do not enter," but the gate was slightly open. He stepped in. The air inside was thick, wet, silent in a way that rang in his ears. His footsteps echoed, but something else echoed louder. His thoughts. Every step forward felt like digging deeper into himself. Midway, through the tunnel, the world changed. Not suddenly, just subtly. The walls started breathing. The ground shifted like memory. And up ahead, a circle of candles lit themselves. In the center stood a man. No face, just a mask made of cracked glass, reflecting everything and nothing at once. "You are late," the figure said. Trao didn't speak. You're not the first to arrive, and you won't be the last, but you are at a moment that matters. Then the figure raised a hand. Behind him, 5 objects floated in the air: a guitar pick, a page from an unfinished book, a photograph of a child laughing, a key with no lock, and a stopwatch that was stuck at 0. These, the figure said, are fragments, pieces of the person you were before you gave yourself away. Trao asked what he was supposed to do. Take one, the figure said. Only one, but choose carefully. Each path changes the ending. Trao stared at the items. His hand moved on its own, reaching toward the photograph, the child laughing. The moment his fingers touched it, the tunnel exploded in light, and then darkness. When he opened his eyes, he was on his apartment floor, breathless, cold, the photograph still in his hand. But something was different. The world wasn't quieter. It was clearer. For the first time in years, he could hear things he had tuned out. The sound of his own heartbeat, the distant laughter from a neighboring building, the soft hum of life beyond his walls. He stood up slowly, and when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see the same tired man. He saw a crack forming, not on the glass, but in his own numbness. A break, a chance. And if you think this is all just poetic fiction, let me tell you something real. There's a woman named Elira, worked corporate, made 6 figures. Everyone thought she was winning, but every night she sat in the dark with music playing and tears she couldn't explain. One day she went skydiving, just to feel something. It wasn't the fall that changed her, it was the moment after landing. Her feet hit the ground and she started screaming, not in fear, in release. She quit her job the next day. Now, she teaches kids how to dance, says she makes 1/3 the money and sleeps 3 times better. Real stories, real shifts. Because sometimes you don't need trauma to break. You just need silence that lasts too long. Trao sat on the floor and wrote a letter to himself. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't long, just 1 sentence. I don't know where we're going, but I'm finally ready to go. That night, he left his apartment. No bag, no plan, just the photograph in his coat pocket. And in the distance, above the rooftops, the silhouette of a crow circled once, then disappeared into the night. Not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be found. And for the first time in years, he was finally willing to look. 3 days passed, and Trao had no idea where he was going. He walked through neighborhoods with no names, slept in empty train stations, talked to no one, listened to everything. The noise of the city started to sound different, not like chaos, but like code. Patterns in horns, secrets in footsteps. His world wasn't quieter, it was clearer. One night, rain chased him into an old bookstore. No name, just a cracked glass door and dust thick enough to write in. Inside, the air smelled like forgotten time, paper, wood, something else, something sacred. An old man sat behind the counter, wearing glasses with only 1 lens and a sweater, full of holes. Without looking up, the man said, "Looking for something you lost?" Trao hesitated. "I don't know what I'm looking for." The man finally met his eyes. "That's how you know it's real." Then he motioned toward the back. 3rd shelf, behind the blue-covered journal. Trao walked past stacks of books that leaned like drunks, some titles in languages he didn't recognize. When he reached the shelf, he pulled away the blue journal, and behind it was a small black box. No label, no lock, just a box. He opened it. Inside, 1 cassette tape and a note. It read, "Play only when you're ready to listen to yourself." The old man handed him a rusted tape player from under the desk. "Take it," he said. "But remember, the truth never screams. It whispers, loud enough to break you if you're not steady." That night, under a bridge lit by flickering neon signs, Trao pressed play. The tape began with static. Then came a voice, his voice, younger, softer, but undeniably his. It was a recording of him, At 17. A tape he must have made and forgotten. "Hey, future me," the voice said. "If you're listening to this, I hope you haven't forgotten what we said. You promised me we'd never end up like everyone else. Numb, hollow, pretending. You promised you'd still believe in the fire." A pause. "I don't know what happened to us, but if you're hearing this, you can still come back." Trao's hands were shaking, because suddenly he remembered. He remembered who he used to be. The boy who wrote songs on napkins, who stayed up till 3 a.m. just to dream out loud, who believed cities were alive and strangers were stories waiting to be unlocked. But somewhere along the way, life told him to shrink, be smaller, fit in, stop reaching, and he listened until now. The next morning, he found himself in front of a grey door with no sign. He didn't know why, only that his feet brought him there. Inside was a woman with white hair and paint-covered fingers. She looked up from her canvas and smiled like she had seen him before. "People like you always arrive around this time," she said. He asked, "People like me?" "Those on the edge of remembering." She handed him a brush and pointed to a blank wall. "No rules," she said. "Just let it out." Trao didn't know what he was painting, but his hands moved before his thoughts could catch up. Strokes wild, shapes broken, colours angry, then soft. It wasn't art, it was released. It was honesty, without apology. When he stepped back, the wall showed a doorway, and inside the doorway, a silhouette standing in a storm. Not afraid, not lost, just becoming. He turned to the woman, breathless. "What is this place?" She didn't answer, just smiled again and said, "You've already been here, in dreams, in breakdowns, in the silence you kept calling empty." And then she whispered, "This isn't the end, you know. This is the part where you stop dying quietly." For the first time, Trao laughed. Not a happy laugh, a real one. The kind that comes from breaking open. Now here's where the real part comes in. There's a guy named Devon. Spent 15 years doing the right thing, climbing corporate ladders, eating meal preps, shaking hands, smiling in meetings. Then one day, he got into a fender bender. No one got hurt, but something inside him broke. He quit his job, sold his car, vanished for 7 months. When he came back, he was barefoot, teaching yoga on rooftops, writing poetry in train stations. And people said he lost it, but he swears it's the first time he ever had it. Trao walked out of the studio with paint on his hands and something wilder in his chest. The kind of feeling you get when you're standing on the edge of everything you used to be, ready to jump into everything you could be. He didn't go home. He didn't need to, because he realized home was never a place. It was a state of being, and for the first time, he felt like he was walking toward himself, not away. The next day, he walked into a coffee shop and smiled at a stranger. Just smiled. No reason, and they smiled back. That's it. That's the whole story in one blink. Because when you've spent your life invisible to yourself, even a single moment of connection feels like thunder. Later that night, standing on a rooftop, watching the moon paint silver across the buildings, he whispered one sentence, "I think I'm almost back." The crow returned, not flying this time, just perched, quiet, watching, and then it nodded once. Not approval, not warning, just recognition. And sometimes that's enough. The city didn't change, but Trao did. He saw the same streets, the same broken signs, the same tired people, but he moved differently through them now, like he wasn't escaping anymore, like he was finally returning to something older than memory. The noise still howled, sirens, brakes, footsteps slapping against wet pavement, but beneath it, he could hear something else, his own rhythm, not louder, just clearer, like he was no longer fighting the chaos but dancing with it. He'd stopped trying to explain himself, to others, to himself. Some stories don't need subtitles, they just need to be felt. And that was the thing. He could feel again. He started showing up in places that once terrified him. Not because the fear vanished, but because he finally saw that fear was never the enemy. Fear was just the gatekeeper before freedom. One morning, Trao went back to the rooftop. Same view, same skyline, same edge. But this time, he didn't stand near it to fall. He stood near it to fly. He whispered, "This is not where I break. This is where I begin." Then he laughed, quietly, powerfully, because he realized he didn't need wings. He just needed permission, and he gave it to himself. It was that simple. The next chapter of his life didn't begin with fanfare or fireworks. It began with small rebellions, sitting still, saying no, crying without shame, smiling for no one but himself, letting go without ceremony, choosing peace even when chaos begged for attention. He found a job fixing antique radios, not for money, just to be around forgotten things that still had something to say. And he started writing again, in notebooks, on napkins, in margins, not to publish, not to impress, just to stay in conversation with the part of him that never stopped listening. One night, he wrote, "Healing isn't becoming new. It's remembering who you were before the world taught you to disappear." That line stayed with him. He saw himself in people now. The woman was crying on the train, but pretending she had allergies. The old man talking to a photo like it still breathed. The teenage boy scribbling graffiti wasn't destruction. It was prayer in disguise. He didn't interrupt. Their silence just honored it. Because some people don't need advice. They need witnesses. Here's the truth. Not everyone understood the new Trao. Some called him strange, said he'd changed, and he had. He had traded numbness for nuance, traded urgency for presence, traded the performance of okay for the honesty of becoming. He wasn't chasing happiness anymore. He was chasing wholeness, and that changes everything. He found a girl, or maybe she found him. They didn't fall in love fast. They grew it like a garden. Some days it bloomed, some days it didn't. But it was real, and that made it sacred. One night, she asked him, "What broke you?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Not being seen, not even by me." She nodded, held his hand. No therapy session, no rescue fantasy, just presence. And in that silence, something softened inside him that hadn't in years. They didn't need each other to be whole, but they made space for each other's holes. That was enough. Now here's the 10% real part you need to hear. There's a small clinic in Berlin that's been working with trauma survivors using a method that doesn't involve medicine, therapy, or traditional intervention. It's called deep witnessing. The rule is simple. A person tells their story, start to finish. No interruptions, no solutions, no feedback, just pure listening. And what did they find? Most people don't need to be fixed. They need to be heard so deeply that they remember they're not broken. Trao started doing this, not professionally, just intentionally, with strangers, with friends, with himself. Every Sunday, he'd sit in the park and leave a sign on the bench. "I'll listen. You talk. No fixing." And people came. A girl who'd just buried her dog. A man who hadn't spoken to his father in 12 years. A woman who never told anyone she wanted to be a dancer. A boy who was too afraid to say he was lonely. They talked. He listened. No fixing. And still, things healed. Because the heart doesn't need repair. It needs recognition. Months passed. And one rainy morning, Trao stood in front of a mirror, not to fix his hair, not to judge his face, just to look. He saw a man with tired eyes and steady hands, a man who had fallen, disappeared, cracked open, and somehow crawled his way back to himself. He whispered, "I remember you." Then he smiled. And the mirror didn't just reflect a face, It reflected a return. He walked out of the apartment, left the door unlocked, not because he didn't care, but because he wasn't afraid anymore. The city didn't slow down for him. But he no longer needed it to, because somewhere in the roar of everything, he'd found stillness. And stillness doesn't scream to be heard. It just is. He stopped chasing meaning and started becoming it. The crow returned one last time. It didn't land this time. It flew overhead, circling once, twice, then vanishing into the sky. Trao watched it disappear and whispered, "Thank you," because he finally understood. The crow wasn't a sign. It was a mirror. And he was never lost, just waiting for the silence to get loud enough to find him.